Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today on this Saturday morning. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links and a quick reminder. Saturday Nightmares, live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you all there. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share this video. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Alright guys, so we're going to start this upload off with a rather interesting video clip from a news agency. No, it's not the one from Colorado. And the one from Colorado, I just want to talk about that really quick. The husband and wife were on a train trip and just happened to be, looking out the window. Someone in front of them had noticed this creature walking. And I have seen, there's a video by a channel that has debunked it. The same channel that has brought us a couple of videos that they said were absolutely true, and they're not, because one was owned by Elias Hernandez and another was created by an SFX artist, special effects artist, out of Brazil. But nonetheless, this is another Bigfoot sighting caught and put on TV, computers, brought to the attention of the nation. And I think that's cool. I really think it's cool, because before the UFO disclosures and stuff like that, this is what started happening. They started to release Bigfoot footage periodically, and then more and more and more. And I know where I live in Glens Falls, New York, we have a local newspaper called the Post-Star. And anytime there is a Bigfoot sighting, it's in the Post-Star. Robert and Paul Bartholomew had written a book about that really kind of famous Bigfoot encounter out of Whitehall. And they've been interviewed by the paper as well. So is that a soft disclosure, or is that just local fame? I myself think it's a little bit of both. But that's just me. Here's that video from that news agency. Check it out. All right, guys. So I mentioned about the news agency covering the Colorado one as well. I want to include that really quick so you guys can actually see that it isn't some like internet cheese video like we get quite often. This is actually covered by the news. And I really do think when the news covers these kind of sightings, that it's right along the lines of that soft disclosure. Maybe within the next 20 years, we will get a definite, yes, Bigfoot exists. I doubt we'll ever get a Dogman exists, though. That's something they're going to keep tucked away for a very long time. But I think what'll happen is if anyone asks, if they do disclose that information about Bigfoot, they'll say, misidentification. Definitely a Bigfoot. Anyway, here's that next news feature. Check it out. I don't know if that helps not convince, but possibly lead us into kind of a more believable view of that video. I myself, honestly, and I will say it, and I hate saying what I think of videos, I feel like that is a pretty authentic video. First of all, they're on a train, and who the hell is going to be in the middle of the desert or that kind of area in a suit like that on a hot sunny day waiting for a train to go by? Just definitely not kind of a setup, or in my eyes. That's in my eyes. I've read in other areas, the train was slowed down. I saw it somewhere, it was slowed down. No, it was not. It was the video that was slowed down so you could see more of the detail. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed that little bit. Let's get into some encounters. Today's first encounter. Wyoming, the least populated state in the United States, but nonetheless one of the most beautiful and dramatic landscapes. From rolling hills and sagebrush to thick forests with mountains, rivers, and streams. That's where I call home. I grew up on my family's ranch just outside of Cody. A little bit about myself. I'm 6'4", 220. My close family calls me Farm Boy because of my size. I take it as a compliment because Luke Skywalker from Star Wars was called Farm Boy, and Luke Skywalker's is amazing, so take that, Grandpa. My favorite hobby is fly fishing. Nothing is more exhilarating than watching your fly get swallowed by a trout. Wyoming, in fact, is world-class and known for fly fishing. My favorite river to fish is the Snake River. It is a little bit of a drive to get to my favorite spot, but it's worth it. My terrifying encounter happened back in 2013. At the time, I was 19 years old. It was late summer, July to be exact, at around 3 in the afternoon. Trust me, I remember after that incident. To get to my spot, you have to take a dirt road 3 miles in. And to get to this little pull-off and park, and have to walk about a half a mile through the woods. To be honest, I have no clue how my dad found this spot, but let me tell you, it is loaded with rainbow. You come out of the woods onto this shore, and there's the river. It's about 30 feet wide, and on the far side is fast-moving water. There are many slow and deep pools toward my side that is perfect for fish. For those who are new to fishing, the slower-moving pools are where the fish like to hang out because they're being lazy and are basically waiting for food upstream to drift downstream right to them for an easy meal. Anyway, since it was 3 in the afternoon, it was pretty warm outside, so I didn't put on my waders and I just walked right into the nice cool water and started casting. I had my fishing glasses on so that the glare wasn't so bad off the water. Here's where things start to get a little wacky. I'd been fishing this strip of river for 45 minutes, then cast it again, and all of a sudden I heard a tree fall from the other side of the river with a loud crash. It scared the crap out of me, to be honest, because I was so focused on the river. The river isn't as loud because at this section of water it isn't moving as fast, keep in mind. I looked in the direction of the crash and saw a jet black, hairy animal slowly walking down toward the river. At first glance, I thought it was a black bear, but upon further inspection, I realized that this was not a bear but a large black dog. Another thought came to mind as I thought it was Yellowstone black wolf, but I again ruled that out because of the size. It was too big. Then it really came into view and my mind went blank. It came out of the trees onto the far bank and just stopped staring at me. It had the most beautiful yet terrifying ember eyes I had ever seen. It had a wolf-like head with sharp teeth. It was very well built and very defined through its fur. It had skinnier legs, but they were dog legs and still defined. Its arms were lanky, and it had hands that ended in sharp claws. That was the scariest part. I even remember taking off my glasses and rubbing my eyes to see if what I was looking at was real. The craziest part is that it walked and just sat patiently on the opposite bank, just like a house dog watching me fish curiously. I was so astonished and confused that I forgot my line was in the water. Then its ears perked up as a giant trout took my fly with a splash. It looked at me, then the line at me, then the line again, as if it was waiting for me to do something. I don't know why I didn't run. I don't know why I didn't feel threatened at the moment, but that Dogman thing just sat there, curiously watching me. It didn't mean me any harm. I quickly reeled in that fish. It was world record time, no doubt. I grabbed the fish, unhooked the fly, and was about to release it when the Dogman growled, a deep and guttural growl. Words cannot describe that noise. I froze as I saw this thing stand on 2 legs and start to wade through the water toward me like a human would. I started to quickly move to my side of the shore. When I did, a short but loud grunt as it pointed with its claw at the fish in my hand. There were so many thoughts going through my head that I quickly ran out of the water onto the shore and dropped the fish on the ground and started backing away toward the forest with my hands up. I even remember saying, "It's all yours," like 4 times. The Dogman crossed the river and went to my now flopping fish as it picked it up with one hand and looked at me with this, "Really, dude, you got my food dirty" look. Then put its claw through the fish's gill and out its mouth just like a human would. It then went back into the river with the fish now hooked on its claw. It put it into the water and moved it back and forth as if washing it off, then put it into its mouth, got back onto all fours as it crossed the river. It looked back at me one more time, taking the fish out of its mouth and giving this little wiggle, taunting me as it ran back into the woods. I sprinted to my truck, threw the gear in, and sped home. I got pulled over, unfortunately, and told the officer everything. He let me go with a warning, seeing my panicked state. I told my family, and they were astonished, but ultimately believed me. This, hands down, has been the craziest, most unnatural thing that has ever happened to me. I still go fly fishing, but I never and will never go back to that spot again. Remember that some things in this world are unnatural, and you never know what might happen. You know, that's kind of a really interesting story, or experience, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, some people may be apt to say, "Oh yeah, it's horse crap, like it knew how to do that." Well, these things, I do believe they watch humans. I believe they watch us when we're in the woods and we don't even know they're there. Chances are that thing has watched fishermen fish that spot for years and seen how they, maneuver with the fish, how they string them through the gill out the mouth, and chances are that's why it did it. I truly 100% believe that they do watch us, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe because they have that intelligence that they want to learn from us as well. I do believe Bigfoot does the same. Anyway, let's get on to the next encounter. I'm a 28-year-old guy with a family of 4, and a pretty good job. The paranormal has followed me and my immediate family for the better part of 2 decades. I grew up in a house that could rival the Conjuring house. I've been there. I don't know about that. But that's a story for a different time. The first time I experienced this creature, I was taking a hike with my brother and my now wife down some trails behind my house. We were getting tired, but decided to go a little further. That would prove to be a mistake. We made it to this dome-like area and then realized it was completely constructed by woven trees. When we stepped inside, my girlfriend said she's not going in. When I tried to convince her that's when my brother and I noticed how quiet it really had gotten and took a look around. I noticed what looked like a hand placed on a trunk of a nearby tree. It looked like what a raccoon hand would look like, only maybe 4 times the size. Definitely twice the size of what a human hand would look like, with long claws. I don't know where this courage came from, but I took 2 steps towards it, and to this day I wish I had not. Looking down on me was the most horrific sight I've ever witnessed. Upside down, as if it were crawling down the tree, was what I can only describe as a werewolf looking me dead in my eyes. If it were standing up, I'd say it would have at least been well over 6 feet. Its fur, unlike any other Dogman encounter I have ever heard. It was clean, long, black. The eyes were a fiery ember yellow and gold, with a stare that burned into my soul. It pulled its hand back and took a step backwards up the tree. And at that moment, I was able to move again, and my brother, who was standing right behind me, looked at me in complete disbelief and terror. I told him to calmly walk backwards back up the trail until we started hearing cracks in the branches, and we couldn't handle it anymore. We booked it out of there. The last time I saw a creature similar was when my brother and I and his girlfriend were riding on a back road late at night, smoking a little. And I know what you're thinking, but my brother's girlfriend doesn't smoke and was completely sober during the time, and she even cannot explain it. As we turned on this gravel pass, things were deadly quiet. No more than 30 seconds later, something the size of a grizzly bear ran across the road at breakneck speed. We saw it stop on the other side of the road, so we stopped to check it out, being in the safety of our car and all, right? What we saw would be burned into our brains for the rest of our lives. At first we thought we had hit it because its limbs were turning and popping as if its bones were breaking. It wasn't until I saw what appeared to be a red patch over the top of human-looking skin. I gasped, and it looked directly at us, ears perked up like a German shepherd's, eyes glowing a fiery orange with no source of light behind them. We were only 20 feet from this creature, and I saw it open its mouth, baring its teeth at us, with drool dripping from its mouth. At that point, I broke from my trance and screamed at my brother to punch it. He was just stuck staring at this thing. Right as I thought it would come and try to make us a meal of the night, my screams finally got through to my brother, and he gunned it. I don't think it followed us, but I couldn't stop myself from looking out the rearview mirror the rest of the way home. We discussed what it could have been, a dogman, werewolf, skinwalker, maybe, I don't know. We couldn't really come to a conclusion. All we know is that it radiated fear and malice. Sorry for the long story. Thank you for listening. This happened on the back roads of Georgia, and there is something out there. Well, definitely, and I know people get butthurt whenever I say this, definitely not a skinwalker, shapeshifter, or a Native American, native lore of a shapeshifter in that area. Skinwalker, or Yinadalushi, is Navajo. And because of the influx and popularity of creepypasta, Hollywood, Reddit, TikTok, we now have a million people thinking that a goat is a skinwalker, or a skinwalker lives in Maine. Shapeshifters do. But a skinwalker essentially is a Navajo medicine man that practiced black magic and supposedly had the ability to shapeshift. The history behind the skinwalker, or Yinadalushi, is, in fact, medicine man, black magic, Ute and Navajo wars. They would don themselves in kind of like a coyote fur, deer fur head, and do kind of these stealth missions, poison families while they were sleeping. And so probably not a skinwalker, more likely a shapeshifter, if in fact it was, that at all. But that last, Can you imagine you see this hand, and I don't know if it's courage or curiosity that brought him to go to that extra couple of steps and see. But as you see a dog man staring you dead in your face, upside down, and then it goes back up a tree, a step. That's terrifying. That is terrifying. That reminds me of Jeff Deere, a subscriber who just passed a couple months ago. He had an experience with a Bigfoot when he was a teenager and backed into it and had a Halloween costume on because he was scaring his friends in the woods at night. Backed into this Bigfoot, right? Turns around and is face to face with it, takes his mask off, and the Bigfoot's face was like, why is this thing taking its face off? And they both went their separate ways. Jeff was a super, super nice guy, and he will be missed. I've got a photo of Jeff. I'm going to do a memorial for him here coming up. But yeah, it saddened me the day I found out that he passed. I've had a couple of subscribers pass since I started this channel that I grew close with. Terry, Jody's brother, being one, Jeff Deere being another. All right, no more depressing. Let's get into the next Dogman encounter of the day. I believe I saw something resembling the alleged Dogman. Either way, I know I saw something looking out a window of a nearby abandoned house on my street. For anonymity's sake, I'll refer to myself as D, my dad as J, and my uncle as A. My grandparents will be T and L. We live in a small semi-rural street in Virginia. There's only about 4 houses on this said street. We're a type of neighborhood that everyone knows everyone, and our neighbors are our relatives. I live with my dad and my grandparents in the house at the very end of the street, with my Uncle A living closest to the top of the road. We're very lucky to live in this house because we're the closest to the woods. So we saw a lot of deer, turkey, rabbit, and a few bear. Unfortunately, I think that's what attracted this thing to our neighborhood, or maybe it was because I own a lot of books and items that are associated with the occult. Yeah, I admit it wasn't the best type of thing to own, especially when being raised a Christian, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. Anyway, right next to A's house, there is an abandoned house. Now, this house used to belong to my great-grandparents, my grandpa's parents, but the house has been abandoned since they passed. This is where the alleged Dogman usually shows up. I first heard about this Dogman from my grandmother, when she used to tell me stories about this mysterious creature and entities, much to my dismay of my dad. Ma, stop filling his head with its nonsense. She's still a kid. She'll get nightmares, he'd always say. Then my grandmother shot back, that's nonsense. They are real. Yeah, that was my grandmother. She and my grandfather grew up in rural Virginia back in the day, so it wasn't surprising that they had a few tales and encounters to share. My dad, however, did not like them telling me scary stories, and he was always worried that I'd start believing the stuff as well. Some of the stories I believed, but they didn't scare me, like my dad thought they would. I remember one in particular that still sends chills down my spine to this day. This particular story was told by both my grandpa and grandma, and it was about a Native American curse. The experience goes that a shaman possessed the power to transform into a werewolf-like creature. My grandparents called it a shapeshifter, and he slaughtered many innocent people. not just in his tribe, but neighboring tribes and European settlers. My grandparents described this part to me in great detail. Eventually, his powers and black magic were discovered by the tribe, so he was banished. Soon the tribe's warriors tracked him down and killed him while he was in the wolf state. Then, in his last dying breath, he put a curse on the land and said he would come back for their lives. My grandparents say that when his spirit is near, all of the wildlife disappears and goes quiet. The presence of death itself can be felt in the air, and he can be seen as something half man, half wolf. I nervously laughed that off, saying that there is no such thing as werewolves, but my grandfather leaned down and said, "It isn't a werewolf, it's something else, something evil." With me being only 6 when I first heard this, it chilled me to my bone. But it definitely made me more cautious about being out in the woods. Now, I'll stop boring you with all the extra lengthy prologue, and I'll get straight to the experience. I remember the first experience with that thing like it was yesterday. I was 12 at the time, and I was at a nearby field looking for deer tracks. I was in that field all afternoon, and I had already found a deer antler. By the time I was almost at the end of the field, it was already sunset. I decided to finish up and come back in the morning. But first, I wanted to show my uncle the deer antler I had found. As I walked up the street, I noticed a strong smell of what can only be described as wet dog, dead bear rotting in hot summer, and coyote urine. So I ignored it and kept walking down the street. When I got closer to the abandoned house, something big in the window caught my eye. The odor was the strongest here, and only then did I notice that all the sounds in the forest behind the houses were gone. I felt an odd, indescribable chill go down my spine. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. Then I slowly turned my head, more slowly than I ever had before, toward that window. When I saw what was in the window, I froze like a deer in headlights, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. The thing in the window was bent down, allowing its ugly, deformed face to be seen from outside. Now, this thing was tall. Otherwise, it wouldn't be bent down staring at me. I couldn't see a lot of detail because it was getting dark, like I said, and there was little to no lighting in the house. But what I could see was a silhouette of a large wolf-man-like abomination of a creature with 2 glowing red eyes. Its front paws were more like raccoon paws or hands, and they were resting on the windowsill. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then its lips curled back to form this sick, malicious smile, like some psychopathic person. I was still frozen, still gripping that deer antler. I was afraid to move. I considered using the antler to defend myself, but then I remembered how big this creature really was. And then realized that this little buck antler was not going to do anything against this creature. I wanted to scream and I wanted to run back to home to my dad and my grandparents, but I was paralyzed with fear. Just then the creature moved toward the broken down door and stood on the threshold. Suddenly my uncle dashed out to the side with his gun and holster on. He screamed at me to get behind him and shot at this creature. It let out a horrible, distorted, almost human-like scream. My uncle kept shooting at it, and it ran off into the woods. There was a small moment of silence. Then he turned and asked what I was doing outside after dark. I told him that I was looking for deer tracks, and I saw that thing staring at me through the window. He looked at me, not saying a word. Then he looked down, as if to think. Then he looked at me in a serious tone and said, "Do not go out at night and stay out of the woods." After that, he walked me home. He also told me not to speak about this. I wasn't sure why he told me this, but I never spoke about that incident. 2 years later, the first encounter had just turned into a repressed memory, I didn't think about it often, but when I did, I felt that same fear I felt, as if I was reliving it again. The second experience was somehow worse than the first. It was a few days after my 14th birthday. It was after dark. I tended to have a habit of staying up late, so this led to me staying out until 2 in the morning. On this particular night, at around 1:30, I was getting ready for bed when I heard this tap on my window. I turned toward the window only to see nothing. I assumed it was just a bug that hit the window. I resumed my bedtime ritual. So I turned the lights out and climbed into bed, but of course I couldn't sleep, so I started scrolling YouTube, TikTok, and Tumblr. I know it's not the best thing to do when you're trying to fall asleep, but I didn't care. Just when I was about to click onto another video, I heard that tapping noise again. Annoyed, I turned toward the window. Now the window I'm talking about is right in front of the foot of my bed. When I looked out that window, I saw a familiar, eerie silhouette. At once, I knew that this thing was back, and once again, its paw/hand was resting on the bottom of my window, staring at me. Only this time, it had a dead animal in its toothy jaw, and it had blood on its muzzle. Still staring at me, it tilted its head back, opened its jaws to eat the animal. This thing swallowed it whole, I swear to God. I was panicking after watching it eat this animal. Fun fact about me at the time, I recently found out that I have severe anxiety. And I am extremely prone to panic attacks, and unfortunately this encounter and trauma from the past encounter triggered a massive panic attack. If you've ever experienced a panic attack, you'll know that the symptoms are similar to a heart attack: rapid heartbeat, sweating, heavy breathing, feeling dizzy, and etc. It feels like you're about to die. So there I was lying in bed having this god-awful panic attack, and this wolf demon is staring through my window. I'm gripping my chest, panicked. As I looked back at the wolf creature, it had blood-covered paw and hand on the glass. Then everything went black. When I woke, it was 10:30 in the morning. I shot right out of bed and reached for the baseball bat I kept next to my bed and gripped it in my hands, but there was nothing at the window. All that remained of that creature from that night before was its bloody paw print. This is the last encounter I had with this wolf creature, but I still see glimpses of it in the tree line to this day. I still have many questions, like, what is this creature? Where did it come from? Why didn't it break into the house when it was fully capable of doing so? And why didn't it kill me when it had the chance? All I know is this creature is not normal. Ever since that last encounter with that thing, my little Chihuahua dog goes crazy at night, and there has not been any deer or small animals around. It knows where we live, and I have not been able to sleep at night since. Yeah, that's a key thing. Like when I say at night, or at the end of the videos, keep an eye on our pets. You know, when we start to notice, let's say you have an inkling that there's one of these creatures in your area. You start to notice, obviously, the silence. But then you start to notice that a lot of these small animals that you've seen before, squirrel, raccoon, possum, coyote, whatever, varmint, are not showing up as much. And then you start to notice a decrease in the deer population. And then you start to notice your pets going missing. That's when trouble is there. That's why I say, keep an eye on your pets, because these things don't care. They don't care the love that we have for our friend, Your animal is outside at night, and one of these creatures is capable of catching it, it will. Tonight's final encounter is a bonus encounter. I'm tossing in because, well, it just so happens to be in my neck of the woods, the Adirondacks. And growing up here my entire life, I've heard, experience after experience from family, friends, the newspaper, like I mentioned earlier. There's an actual Bigfoot sighting that was reported to Bigfoot. I don't know the name of the website. It's owned by Cash Grabber, Moneymaker. But there's a Bigfoot experience that happened a quarter of a mile from where I grew up. This road called Nolan Road. And at the end of Nolan Road, there's a hill, and it brings you right down to the river, the Hudson River. Funny thing, when I was growing up, when you went down the hill to the boat launch there was a sand pit where teens would party and stuff. But above that, just as you're looping down the hill to go to the boat launch, there was a kind of a hill. And there was an old, I don't know if there was a house there at one time, but it must have been gone for 50 years when I was a kid, because looking at it, it was just this, I don't remember how I think we were smoking cigarettes or something, hiding in the woods, but we just came to it, and it was a set of cement stairs. It looked like a basement. The roof or whatever was covered with dirt, like growth. And all you could see was the stairs that went down into the ground. And it was just black. And, there was like an old tire. I remember there being an old tire that was tossed down there. But it was the freakiest thing I had ever come across at that young age. I think I was probably 12, 13 years old. And never had the courage or curiosity to go down and check it out. But anyway, let's get into tonight's final experience. This particular experience happened when I was a teenager over 15 years ago. I grew up in the Adirondacks and spent most of my childhood and teenage years camping or being outside any capacity. 2 summers in a row, I joined a group that would travel around the rural back roads and pick up garbage, mostly just cleaning up job, usually along the roadside. Occasionally, however, we would be asked by the rangers to clean up trails or county roads where people would dump their garbage in the woods. On this particular day, the group I was with had split up into quadrants. We were given GPS units, however, back then the accuracy was usually within 100 meters, if you were lucky. Was not an issue for me, as I had survival skills, more so than the others in the group. I had dreams of actually being a trail guide or a forest ranger back then. However, others were uncomfortable and chose to stay closer to the main road, which left me having to be dropped off at the end of a Forest Service road and walk my way back to the agreed area of pickup. We each were given a roll of garbage bags and a poke stick to collect the trash. The area I was dropped off at was known as being the worst and largest dump site. People would drop off their old couches, chairs, even mattresses, and various pieces of furniture could be found. But someone with a flatbed truck had already come through and picked up the larger pieces. All that was left were smaller items such as bottles, cans, bags, papers, anything along those lines. Unfortunately, once in a while, you would find things dumped on a more darker nature, like unwanted house pets that were dispatched in an inhumane way. And on this day, I happened to come across a litter of puppies. I was not given a radio, but if I had a radio, I would have called it in, and they would have come and got me at that point. as they're trying to keep us youths from seeing anything serious. This was not the first time I've seen things of this nature, unfortunately, so I took the time to collect all the puppies and put them in a bag instead of leaving them in a pile with the other bags I had already filled. I decided to bury them, so I dropped off my backpack and supplies, my poke stick near the road, and walked into the woods with the bag. I walked maybe 20-ish minutes away from the road before I found a rather large pine that looked like a good resting place for these little guys. I put the bag at the bottom of the tree and started to walk slowly in a circle, searching for a stick or a rock or similar items that I could use as a shovel to make a hole. I found a rather large branch, and I was able to break it in half and use my pocket knife. I always carried to sharpen one end. I went back to the tree and started digging the hole. It took me a while, as there were several roots. I had to work my way around. Once I dug the hole about 1.5 feet deep, I proceeded to lay my ill-gotten quarry without the bag. I didn't want to add to the trash that was already out there. I took a few minutes to cry and pray. Honestly, seeing abuse of any kind is very hard. However, as I was leaving little gifts for them and slowly covering them up, I heard a branch fall about 50-ish feet to my left. The position I was in kept me from being able to see because of the branches from the tree. I was crouched below. I quit talking and moving and just listened for any further sounds. It was not a moment when the forest went quiet. I could still hear birds, but they were way off on the opposite side, further away from where the sound had come, which I had not noticed had changed from being around me to them being to a certain side in my distracted state of being swallowed up by emotions. After sitting there for a couple of minutes quietly looking around and trying to look through the branches to my left, I didn't see anything, so I continued working. After I completely covered the pups up and left several pine cones and a pretty cool rock I had found that I kept in my pocket, I got up and started to walk away. It was at this time I heard what can only be described as a moan mixed with a growl. Now, I'm in bear country, and there are cougars in the area, so that was my main concern. A natural predator had smelled and came to investigate. I only had a pocket knife as any form of defense. I was not scared yet, as I assumed it was two trees rubbing together by the wind. That's rather common when you're in the forest anyway. Looking around, I found nothing, but just as I was about to keep walking, I saw a branch and bark come falling down from the tree about 30 yards from this big pine tree I had just left. I looked up the tree, as it was only about half the size of the large one, and midway up I could see something I still do not have a description for. It looked like it was a brownish gray-green color, no obvious shape that I could describe, and probably only the size of a bear cub. Immediately, I jumped, said a bad word, and turned around and took several steps back, keeping my eyes on this whatever it was. I couldn't tell if it was something alive or not. When it started moving, however, I could tell that it was not something that was attached to the tree. Honestly, I can't tell you what I saw. It did not have fur like a bear or a mountain lion, and it was not just skin either. It almost looked like living moss, but as far as I know, the Adirondacks do not have sloth. And that thing didn't look like any animal I had ever seen. I couldn't tell if it had a head or a face until it turned around and looked at me. It had a face, but it was kind of squished. I couldn't see its eyes or facial features other than it being dark. Excuse the lack of detail. I was around 80 feet from this thing, and it was also in a tree. It was mildly cloudy that day, and if you've ever been in the woods, you know that there is always shade from the canopy, so I couldn't really get good eyesight on this thing. I could tell, however, that it had 4 limbs, and they were wrapped around that tree. The paws were almost raccoon-like, but the claws on it were about as long as fingers. It had a long, rat-like tail that was about the length of its body and would occasionally swish it back and forth. I could see poking out from behind the tree. It climbed down the tree slowly, watching me. And that's when I noticed it had soft, round ears on the side of its face like a person, not an animal. It made no sound as it came down except for the light scraping of its claws. It came to a branch maybe 12 feet off the ground and climbed out upon it. It moved like a raccoon, honestly. But the shape of the body and the rounded head, with seemingly no neck, was definitely not a raccoon. This creature was not a bear or any other animal that I could think of, like a fisher, because it had no snout poking out. Its face was smashed, with a nose that looked like holes. Not any obvious shape, vaguely like a monkey. Its eyes were a lighter color, as if it caught the sun occasionally, and its skin or whatever covered it looked like it could blend in as growth on a tree or rock on the ground. It let out a low-pitched whistle, and that's when I decided I had seen enough. I glanced backwards to make sure my path was clear and turned and pretty much sprinted out. Looking back several times, I wasn't being followed, and I never saw it again, but to this day I wonder what it was. I told the ranger in charge of us that day what I saw, and he said it was probably a raccoon with mange. And when I said the face did not look like a raccoon or any other animal that's local, he said, "You must be mistaken." Its face was similar to that of a snub-nosed monkey, but the color and overall proportions and shapes were not. There are no known monkey species in North America, and it wasn't an escaped exotic pet. I don't have an answer to what I saw that day. It clearly was comfortable climbing trees, so still to this day I look up every time I'm in the woods. I don't know of any creature or species that matches what I saw, and I've spent years researching on off and on. This is not my scariest experience, but it's definitely one of my more strange sightings. Thank you for allowing me to share. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I hope to see you all tonight at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday Nightmares, live from New York. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and blessings.